What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. We've had a lot going on in the last week, including hitting 3,000 subs. Thank you for that.
Inconceivable!
And if you do watch my channel and you haven't subscribed yet, I'd appreciate a subscription, but I appreciate that you're watching anyways. So I've been waiting for 3 weeks now to receive my Dragonbane hardback and Dragonbane bestiary. And unfortunately, even though it was supposed to arrive on February 26th, it's still more than 6 hours away from my home.
It became personal with me.
It's made several stops, just none of them have been at my house. Thanks, U.S. Postal Service. That being said, while I have had that video ready to go, I've got it scripted, I've got everything planned out for it, I'm not going to record it until I have the physical book in my hands. So I keep having to go back to the well and find other topics to discuss with you. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about a topic that is near and dear to my heart and has a little bit of a theming to go along with my upcoming trip to GaryCon. So a couple of years ago, during the pandemic, I really got into Dungeon Crawl Classics, and you'll notice if you go through my channel videos, my first video to hit 10,000 was a Dungeon Crawl Classics buyer guide. And I've got several videos related to DCC on the channel. But I haven't done any for a while because the group that I played Dungeon Crawl Classics with has kind of disbanded. So today, though, I am going to talk about the 5 ways that Dungeon Crawl Classics honors the spirit of Gary Gygax. Let's get into it. Number 5. The dice. The first time I played Dungeons & Dragons, one of the most eye-popping, eye-catching features of that game was that I got to see all sorts of polyhedrals that I'd never seen before. You know, everybody had played some Monopoly or other games that used your standard 6-sided dice, but these polyhedrals were weird. They were really funky, and they were rare. Whenever I was a young man and I was on vacation with my family, I made the mistake of taking my red box basic set D20 and other polyhedrals with me, and I left them at a hotel, and I was absolutely devastated because living in rural Illinois, there were very few places that I was able to go get those dice replaced, and it really put a damper on the gaming that I wanted to be doing with my buddies when I got back from vacation. Well, fast forward to the 2020s when I'm playing Dungeon Crawl Classics for the first time, and I got to experience that same weird, funky dice feel. You don't just have your D4s, your D8s, your D12s, your D10s, your D20s. You've also got your D14s, your D16s, your D24s, and your D30s. So you've got all sorts of options here. And along with that, you're going to have a lot more variety in your rolls. You're going to have a lot of different experiences with these dice than you are accustomed to with your standard 6 set of polyhedrals. 7 if you include the 10-sided D10. So that is going to be my number 5 for how DCC honors the spirit of Gary Gygax. Number 4, line art. Now, I'm sure that had Gary had the ability to have full color spreads throughout his books in those early days, he probably would have. But he worked with what he had. And what he had were creative and very low paid artists that he could work with and create some very easily printed black and white line art images. The one on the right is actually from the first edition Player's Handbook. Now, one of the ways that Dungeon Crawl Classics is very good about honoring the spirit of Gary Gygax is in the fantastic line art that they have throughout their entire line. everything that you're going to see in Dungeon Crawl Classics as far as artwork goes could just as easily have been in an early Dragon magazine or one of the core rule books. It brings you right back to that spot that you were in whenever you first flipped open and you saw in the basic set the cleric was killed by Bargle. You get into that headspace where you are just you're pulled back to when you were a kid again every time you look at that Dungeon Crawl Classics artwork, and it is a great testament to the folks at Goodman Games that they didn't go the easy route and just get some great looking house art. They used the same kind of art that we would have seen in the 80s and the 70s, and that is a great way of honoring the spirit of Gary Gygax. Number 3, keeping it deadly. Players of early editions of Dungeons and Dragons knew that their characters were always in peril.
If he dies, he dies.
The dungeon was deadly, and so was the ground above it. Gary himself had a penchant for bringing his players into very difficult meat grinder scenarios that if they even chose the wrong door, they were very likely to be dead. Total party kills were a very common thing, and for that reason, Gary encouraged players to bring several hirelings with them as ablative wounds and just basically cannon fodder. Well, when you get into Dungeon Crawl Classics, you're going to see a very similar theme. Because if you are playing Dungeon Crawl Classics the way it was intended to be played, you're going to start off with a funnel. A funnel is a meat grinder adventure where you're going to play as many as 6 zero-level characters all by yourself, and each other player is going to have the same number, usually between 4 and 6 characters per person, and almost all of those are going to die because any wrong move or just bad luck is going to result in their untimely demise. It's the reason I own a death stamp.
Right.
The level of satisfaction that you get when you have a hero that manages to actually survive such an adventure is quite memorable and adds so much to the stakes of the game. Whenever you survive a zero-level funnel in Dungeon Crawl Classics, that character gets promoted to a level 1 hero. And that is a fantastic way of honoring the spirit of Gary Gygax. Number 2, keep it weird. In early editions of Dungeons and Dragons, Gary loved to keep sci-fi elements hidden within his game. It was always a fun Easter egg to figure out that the wand with the funny grip was actually a laser pistol that characters just couldn't recognize. Half of the fun for the Dungeon Master was actually in figuring out creative ways to describe technology without giving away the game. As early as the expedition to Barrier Peaks, there were spaceships within AD&D. So with Dungeon Crawl Classics, you're going to see much of the same. There's a very common element of having things that are out of time within the fantasy game that is Dungeon Crawl Classics. If you throw Mutant Crawl Classics into the mix, which is completely compatible, you've got some real great options for sci-fi insertion into your fantasy Dungeon Crawl Classics campaign.
Phrasing?
So if you're playing Dungeon Crawl Classics and you want to stay true to the spirit of Gary, there are plenty of options for Lovecraftian and sci-fi elements to be driven right through your fantasy town and into the worlds of the player characters, and that is a great way to honor the spirit of Gary Gygax. And number 1, the grassroots community engagement. I save this for number 1 because this to me really is at the heart of the success of Dungeon Crawl Classics, and it's also the way that D&D became the phenomenon it did. Whenever we played D&D in those early days in the 80s and the late 70s, there was a real close-knit, small community involved there. You didn't have exposure to mainstream media up until the Satanic Panic, and that was a whole nother issue. But you had these small cliques of outcasts playing this esoteric game that had funny dice, and it was like speaking a special language that nobody else knew. It was its own special little club, and if you were playing D&D in those days, you weren't in any other special clubs, I can tell you that. So with Dungeon Crawl Classics, they've done a great job of making a community for their players to take part, share their stories, and just kind of make sure that they are fostering that camaraderie between those that love their games. Goodman Games has done a fantastic job with this. They've got the Road Crew program. They've got all sorts of ways to just kind of recognize that DCC is a little bit different. It's not your traditional RPG. It's something better. And so those are the top 5 ways that I think Dungeon Crawl Classics honors the spirit of Gary Gygax. If you've got some more, I would love to hear them. Make a comment in the comments section. We'll have that conversation. So hopefully next week, I'm going to be talking in depth about Dragonbane, specifically the bestiary and also the hardback core rulebook, because hopefully, knock on wood, I will actually have it in hand by then. I've already read both of them cover to cover. I know what I'm going to say, but I like having the physical copy to do the video for you guys, so that's what I'm going to do. Again, as a reminder, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.